Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Maker's Bar. I'm your host today, Troy Goldenberg. I'm here today with Lederer DeFrancesco. She ran for the New York State Assembly in New York. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the New York State Assembly. I already said it. Ellen, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Really excited to hear about your journey and your story, what inspired you to run, all those different things. And that's actually how I like to begin is what is your story? Where did that begin? Whether it be from childhood, school, wherever you want to begin that journey.
So in my 20s, my mid to late 20s, I was having a crisis, a writer's block. I was in the middle of writing my doctoral dissertation, and I just couldn't go on. And this was incredibly common for people to not be able to graduate, all but dissertation. It had a cute little acronym. And so I picked up the phone and I called the one person that I could tell anything to, and that was my mother. And I said, I'm having this crisis. I can't write anymore. I don't know what to do. We're all going to die. And she said, what? And I said, here I am. It happened to have been the #1 school in the country for my field. So I had been type A. I had busted my butt my whole life to get into this school. And I'm in there. And I come to the realization that we're just all going to die anyway. So why am I working this hard? And it's funny, it's never the big moments. It's always these small moments you don't even know at the time that they're life-changing. And I remember my mom said, to make somebody else's life better. That's why you're here. You're right, you're going to die. And in 100 years, there's all new people. Nobody's going to even remember you. But it's what you do every day to help somebody else. That's the meaning. That's why you do what you do. And literally changed the way I thought. And from then on, everything I did with, is this going to make somebody's life a little bit better? Because that's the only meaning. Otherwise, what does it matter? So I'm not the most selfless individual. Okay, I understand I still did things for myself. I understood that there was still things I did for joy and pleasure and my own happiness. But at the same time, when I had to make decisions, and I finished my dissertation and everything was fine after that, but that's what drives me and always has been. So I was a New York City teacher, and it was all about my students and making their lives better. And with each professional job I took, that was always in the back of my mind. And then even just in my personal life. So being a teacher was about my third career. So by the time I had met my husband and I had my first child, I would pay more for childcare than my own paycheck. It literally cost me money to work. So I left my teaching job to be a stay-at-home mom. But like I said, I was very type A type personality. And so I started volunteering and I started doing other work that kept me home so I could take care of my child, which is horrible that I have to say in this country, that even now women still have to choose, mostly women, some men, but mostly women have to choose between their careers and their family. And they're put in that position because I literally would have paid childcare more. And so I started doing a lot of volunteer work, and I started really getting involved in the climate change, which I now call the climate crisis. I think we're well past change. So I started doing a lot of work with that and PTA, and I started getting involved in my local political club because I started to really realize, I started taking other positions. My father had always taught me to take leadership positions. So when I bought my apartment in New York City, he's like, why aren't you on the board? That's the most of your money is in that. Go. And I said, why would I do that? I'm in my 20s. You should do it. So I ran for the board and I won. So he was always in the back of my mind, putting in, be a leader, take ownership, get involved. because that's the kind of person he was. And so I was PTA president of my daughter's schools, every school they were in. And I was always trying to find little leadership things I can do and to help other leaders. So when I volunteered for other candidates, I phone banked and I walked doors for them, and I had petition signing, and I helped other people I believed in get elected. And never in my million years did I think that one day someone would walk doors for me or someone would phone bank for me. It was a dream I always did have when I went to school at GW for undergrad. I was an intern in Congress, and I enjoyed it and I loved it. It was always sort of ruminating, but it was such a dream that was so big that I didn't even dare to dream it. But the universe sort of takes care of itself. And I was offered a position to run in local elections. And I said no, because I was scared.
What year was this?
This was 2023, 2022 maybe. And the election, I think, was 2023. It was a super local election. And I hesitated. And I said, give me time to think about it. I don't think so. Because I started getting imposter syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. Lawyers are the people that run, or people who are lifelong politicians, they run, of course, forgetting how they became lifelong politicians. And I hesitated, and it ended up the next day, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And somebody else had said, okay. And I remember saying, I do a lot of meditation and I believe in a lot of intention. And so that next day, that meditation, that intention I put out there was, if I'm asked to run again, I won't let my fear get in the way, and my imposter syndrome and my thinking, why me? You see, over the years, I started to realize that just a small shift in thinking changes everything. So instead of saying, why me? Why not me? Why not? I'm a perfect person for this. I am a listener. I care. I was seeing all these politicians who not only did it for the paycheck, but they did it for the power. They didn't care. And I had these great intentions. Remember, we go back to my mom, right? Mm-hmm. So it's helping other people. And this was an amazing experience. And it was a culmination of everything, all these little things I had done into this one experience. So I said, if this happens again, I'm going to do it. And sure enough, about, I don't know, maybe 8 months later, I got another call for even a bigger local position. And that was for the New York State Assembly. And they said, would you do it? Not even hesitation. I'm in. I'll do it. Why not me?
I love that lesson learned. That's a great lesson learned. Actually, one of my brothers, he's a big athlete. He's a big, like, long distance athlete guy. I think he was doing a half Ironman at the time, and he made shirts, why not us? Like Team G, Team Goldenberg, why not us? And it's the same philosophy of, you have this imposter syndrome. Well, why can't I do this? Why not me? So it reminds me of that story, and it's a great life lesson. And then what were, like, the lessons you learned when running for this election? I'm sure this is probably the biggest election you've ever ran for. So, like, what were some, like, oh, I didn't see this coming, and this is always surprises that come in?
I didn't see anything coming. I did not know anything of what I was doing. I can tell you, I had done some organizing. I started a blog for climate to help people make better climate choices, sort of with humor. And so I was always organizing and having events and doing things like that in my community. But this was nothing there. It's almost good that I went in so naive. The one thing that I did that I can't stand in my professional career, and I've heard it time and time again when I was a New York City teacher, when I worked in television, you name the job, I heard it. But this is always the way it's been done. We've always done it this way. We have to do it this way. I hate that because it's lazy, and you're always supposed to question. Things change. growth is important. If you're not growing every single day, you might as well be dead. My goal in life is to learn something new every single day. So, and it doesn't have to be, astounding. It could be, just some small thing. There's always got to be forward movement. I don't want to stay stagnant. And so I knew that I did not want to run it the way everybody else has done it. I heard stand outside bagel stores and greet people, and nobody was doing social media. And my entire past, 10 years, my background was in blogging and social media. And I said, no, you have to meet people where they're at. Nobody was running a digital campaign the way I wanted to run it. Just everything that was told to me, this is how we do it, I questioned it. Some of the information was great. I continued it. But others I just didn't. The first thing that I had done was I looked up who ran before me, because I don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I called up and I introduced myself and I said, tell me everything that went wrong. Tell me everything that went right. Tell me everything. And I was very lucky to have somebody who ran before me who just became a really good mentor and sat me down and explained things, the ins and the outs. And then I picked people outside of the political arena. So my campaign manager was my husband, who had done years in graphics. He's an Emmy award-winning graphics artist, and so he ran an entire huge company's division. So he was doing my newsletters, and he was doing my logos, and he was doing all my comms. He was an expert comms guy, not in politics, but everything's transferable. Mm-hmm. We looked at everybody that we liked and didn't like, and we just started to see what they did. Now, we didn't mimic, because the interesting thing is what works for one person. I got the idea of sitting down and doing TikToks like Jeff Jackson, because I thought he just did a stellar job. Did I do it identical to the way he did it? No, because I'm a different person. Mm-hmm. It's very important to stay true to myself and to be unique, because people see right through that. And when it comes down to it, it's all about people and about connection. I'm obsessed with the blue zones, longevity, how to live a long, healthy life, and how to die with dignity. Now, it's a little morbid, but I want to know that at the end of the day, that my life stood for something. Again, harking back to my mother's conversation. And so I follow a lot of end of life helpers and caregivers, and they say the same thing. Nobody on their deathbed talks about they wish they spent more time at work. Nobody talks about my job made me who I was. They're always about the connections, family, people, experiences. I wish I took those vacation days. And so those stay in the forefront of my mind. I had the great privilege to hold my father's hand as he died. And I promise you, he was incredibly successful, but he wasn't talking about money at the end of his life. And so I always want to be real, authentic, and meet people where they are and help people, because it's just, when it comes down to it, it's all about people. That's it.
I love that. Actually, before we get into specific policies on the campaign, were there any specific success stories? Like, I would do this again if I ran again, and any specific failures, or I would change this if I ran again?
So I never TikToked before, and I ended up getting 3,000 followers in less than 2 months. And it was amazing talking to people and getting donations from all over the country. A lot of people got hate, and I was expecting the trolls, the bots, the hate. And I got to tell you, I never received that. And I don't know if it was my message. The one really important thing I learned in politics, that you're never going to believe me because of the climate we're in now, but I ran on it and I believe in it. We are more alike than we are different. We truly are. Yes, the extremes, those are exactly what they are, extremes. But most of the people fall in the middle of that bell curve. And so even with extremists, I was able to I just wanted to talk and have a conversation. But more importantly, I wanted to listen. It's very important. And I read books on how to be an active listener. I know we all joke around like, yeah, I'm a listener. No. You're just waiting for your turn to speak, or you want to bring your point across, or you're trying to convince me of something. I really sat down and spoke to people and listened. I did very little of the talking. I wasn't convincing anybody of my side. I just wanted to hear what concerned them, because at the end of the day, when you are elected, you work for them. The people are my boss. And it's important. Yes, I do have my own beliefs, but I'm representing my community, and it's important. Even the people, the extremists that I don't agree with, even the people that just say horrible things that make me shudder, they're still people in my community. And so it was a very interesting, I learned that. I learned how to be a better listener. I knocked on thousands of doors. I made it my point to knock on doors. I made it to my point not to speak to people who had the same viewpoints I had. I didn't shy away from the different parties that we were in. And at the end of the day, I even got some of them. So, it was more common sense and moderate, and people are people. And I learned a lot. I did. And I had a lot of people yell at me, and that's okay, because they're frustrated. I remember one gentleman screaming at me. I went to knock on his door, and he said, "You're all a bunch of liars. Get away from me." And I said, "Sir, you're probably not wrong. Like, I feel your anger. Like, I feel it too. I understand. So I'm going to go now."
And so when you're saying that you're having these conversations, some of them got heated. I'm sure they were about specific policies. So when you were running, what specific policies were you running on that motivated you and gave you the passion to run in that first place?
And so I have 2 daughters, and obviously I'm a woman, and I'm surrounded by female friends. And I wish I had thought of it, but Elizabeth Warren says that if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And I am sick and tired of having women who are over 50% of the population in the United States. We are just not represented. We are 1/3 women are in the New York State Assembly, 1/3. So when you're not, representation matters. And when you're not in the discussion, you're not sitting at the table, you don't have the power. And so the first reason I ran was because I wanted to represent women.
Oh, is that me or her? We'll give it a pause and see if we can get Ellen back here. I think she dropped out. It might be mine. And we're back. Sorry, little hiccup there with Wi-Fi. Ellen is back, and you were just saying the different policies you're running on and why you ran. And the first reason was
women.
Represent women. Yeah, so we
That's
can pick
right,
up
to
from there.
represent women. So that was one of the reasons. And the other is to tie back to the original story that I had talked about earlier, was I had to leave my career because of childcare. So childcare is a huge issue. And it's not just a female issue. It's predominantly a female issue, but it happens for all families, for a lot of families, men as well. So I was running on that. I was running on the economy. I live in Long Island, and it is incredibly expensive here. Insanely expensive. And so people, the joke here is you can live on, you get 6 figures, you make a great income, you can't take a vacation, you can't afford to live here. So it's really a lot about the economy. I told you that I held my dad's hand as he passed away. We have an aging population, thank goodness. Again, longevity is important. It was really important to me for people to be able to age in their homes. I was lucky enough to keep my father in his home and to take care of him, but some people are not so lucky. And so to be able to age with dignity and with respect, So a lot of these are common sense, everybody wants to be able to put their head down at night and know their families are safe. I was a New York City teacher. So, I mean, education is hugely important to me, which all these issues are tied together. So if your school system isn't as good as it should be, your house prices then go down, and then you have a problem with affording where you live. And so they all sort of tie in together, your taxes. And so I ran on a multitude of issues that are all, when you look at them, there's no just one simple thing. It's almost like dominoes. And so that was what was really important. Same with the people in my area really cared about taxes and affordability. We're having a huge housing crisis, and we're having problems here affording. So you grow up on Long Island, you want to stay here. I stayed here to be with my family. Well, young people, they can't afford to stay here. They're moving in with their families and living until their 20s and 30s. And look, my mom talked about living in the Bronx, and it was very multi-generational living. Her aunts and her grandmother, everybody lived in the same apartment house. And that sounds lovely. It really was a great way of growing up. And so if families choose to live intergenerationally, I think that's wonderful. But it's about choice. And they shouldn't have to, because they can't afford to. Where families can't afford to live separately, they have to live together. So, and of course, since we're talking about choice, a woman's right to choose her own healthcare, make her own healthcare decisions, is hugely important. When I was running for the New York State Assembly, on our ballot was the ERA that enshrined in our New York State Constitution a women's right to choose. I don't care. You want to have, you want to keep a baby, you don't want to keep a baby, I'll support you either way. I'll hold your hand. But you should be able to make that choice with your family and your healthcare provider based on the best decision for you. So these were all sort of reasons I ran.
That makes sense. And then were there any like big differentiators between you and your competitor when you were running? Because you were running for the Democratic primary spot. So a lot of those things, so like something as women's choice, being pro-choice, that's something that's like, I think it's going to be 100% support. I can't imagine actually it's not close to 100% support. And your competitor be running on that same thing. Was there anything that you ran on that your competitor specifically wasn't running on, like some sort of a clash there?
Going to work. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I lost to a gentleman who served our community for 22 years. I mean, I commend to anybody, but he is close to 90 years old and has special dispensation and no longer goes to work. He hasn't been in Albany in years. He literally does not go to work. He votes on Zoom. When he does vote, he's just non-existent. He's collecting a paycheck. And so the big difference between myself and my candidate, the other candidate, was that he didn't go to work. I mean, there were times that I literally told people who were completely different views than I had, and they would say, "What's the difference between you and the incumbent?" And I said, I'll show up. I'll answer my phone. So when you call me, or you email me, or you text me, or you message me on social media, I'll answer you back. Because right now, we don't have anybody. I spoke to a local business leader and I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I have to call the assemblyman in the next district over." And it's like a known running joke. Like they know, like he's MIA. So it's really tough also it was a tough loss in that people couldn't get past the party. And I don't think it's even that. I think people don't know and follow local politics. They were very surprised when I said, he's, close to 90 years old. Now, I had a 95-year-old grandmother who lived in the Bronx by herself and read 4 newspapers. She was with it. She went everywhere. She would take the express bus, multiple express buses into Manhattan. This gentleman is not my grandmother. That's not what we're talking about here. And so it was difficult when he won again. He didn't even campaign. Like, he knew.
So
He knew he didn't have to.
So what do you think it was? Do you think it was just name recognition? Was the national party behind him? What were those factors that you thought made the difference there in those extra 20,000 votes? It looks like.
Yes. So I think it's a couple of things. I don't necessarily think it's name recognition, because when I knocked on doors, the first thing I said was, "Do you know who your assembly person is?" And they said, "No, what's an assembly person?" So right there was really, I think people have a lack of understanding of civics and how government works. They have a much better understanding of federal, because suddenly your school or the news talks about it more. So you understand, okay, there's 2 senators in every state, and you got a general idea. Maybe you're able to answer the name of one of them. So I don't necessarily think it was name recognition. I think it was, I think their party is more entrenched, and maybe they're more organized. It's hard for me to say, because I can't witness what they do. They were definitely coordinated, because I know this gentleman did not campaign. He did not put his signs up, but there were signs up everywhere. So I think they ran a more coordinated, somebody else picked up the slack for him and took care of that. I think just the numbers, there's more. I think it was a different time. I honestly thought this was going to be the age of the woman, I guess. I was running with a lot of other women, and I thought that this was going to be our time. And I think it backfired, is sort of where I'm gathering. I can tell you, everybody lost with me. It wasn't just me. Not everybody. We did gain a person here and there. But a lot of the people, the other candidates, wonderful, wonderful women, actually, and some men, they didn't win either.
So you say it backfired. What about the strategy do you think backfired there?
I think just the way it is, I think it was more of the patriarchy, coming in, and I ran against a gentleman. He had a gentleman's name. So I think part of that, I think part of maybe people didn't come out and vote. This is the other thing that I learned, and I didn't know it was a thing until I was running. People go in, it was a presidential election, and they vote for the president, and then they leave. They don't go down ballot. And I was, in a lot of cases, the very last circle on the ballot. I was the very last one, because of the way that it sits and how they actually changed it now. They flip-flop some of the positions. So if I ran today, I wouldn't be the last. But I think people didn't finish the ballot. Maybe it's me. Maybe some of the didn't resonate with people. I don't know. I do know I did a very big digital campaign, so I got I was able to see that they clicked on it, and I had more of the other party clicking on my ads than my own.
Interesting.
It was. So I did make headway, and that's what I wanted to do, because I wanted to include everybody. But I felt short. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just not a winnable seat. I don't know. Maybe people voting didn't like the name Ellen. It's funny, and this sort of thing, I don't know, and I don't get the same polling or information these talking heads and all these articles that I read about people going back in the election and being able to do a deep dive. I just wasn't able to do a deep dive, and it's okay, because something, I believe in democracy, and the people didn't want whatever I was offering, and that's okay. That's part of the process. That's part of what I signed up for. You know, it's funny. I remember thinking, if I lose, I'm going to be embarrassed. And that was a thought that I had. And then I had to say, what do you teach your daughters to go for it? It's the journey, to not be embarrassed, to do something that's going to make you grow, to do something you're frightened of. And you're sitting here and you're just, that's what scares you? No. You're going to move past it. Just like this interview. When I first got the email, every instinct says no. What if you don't like what I have to say? What happens if we run out of things to say? What happens if it doesn't resonate with people? All these things. And you know what? I stop for a second, I take a deep breath, and I decide to do everything that frightens me. Because that's how you grow. You have to get outside your comfort zone. And so I said, of course I'm going to do this. So of course I was going to run. And it's okay that I lost. It sucks. I know, it really does. I really thought I was going to win. I actually ran like it was a full-time job. I woke up at 5 a.m. and I went till like midnight. And I did that for 9 months.
So what were your days like while you were running? Like, I know every day is probably a little different, but in general, at 5 a.m. to 12 p.m., what were you doing?
It was Groundhog Day. So I decided that if you haven't noticed already, when I do something, I go all in. So my husband wasn't working. We decided we were going to be a team. We also don't like the people that run like the last 2 months before the election. So we started 9 months before. I would get up at 5 a.m. and the first thing I would do is walk a couple of miles with a friend of mine, a local friend. And she was great because we have completely different views, different parties, and we talked a lot about different ideas, you know. So I did that for my own mental health and my step count. I'm in a competition with a friend and I'm competitive. So I walked almost every single morning. So I would do that for like an hour or two. And relax, have coffee, try to meditate as best I could. My mind was going a million miles a minute. Obviously, take care of my daughter that was home. She was a senior in high school, so doing that sort of stuff, get her out. But luckily, she was self-sufficient. And then hit the road. I always had somebody with me. I would walk about 3 hours a day, knocking on doors. It was my goal to like hit thousands of doors and speak to people one-on-one. So I did that. Then when I came home to have lunch, I would then do cold calling, phone calls. I can't tell you how many people that said, are you calling for Ellen? I was like, no, I'm Ellen. And they're like, oh my God, that's you. And so I did that. My fundraising, I was lucky. New York State had a matching funds program. So I was able to raise a really good amount of money in 2 months' time because I met a matching funds program. So if you hit certain benchmarks, the state gave you money towards, it's open to everybody. So every candidate that's state run. And so raising funds until I hit that benchmark, that was my number one goal, was hit that benchmark. So when I spoke to people or I called people, that was part of it. But it was the very end. I don't like what a lot of politicians do, where they will, hi, can you give me money? Hi, can you give me money? It was like, oh, and by the way, if anything resonated, feel free, $5 makes a difference. It was very after the fact. I didn't want anybody to think I wasn't going for that.
What was the majority contribution? The majority of contributions there, were there like small donations? Were there a few big donations or?
No, all small.
Oh,
all
wow.
Small. I wanted to go. I went with that whole $5 small, no organizations. One organization had given me a small check, but it was a female run organization. It wasn't like a special interest group of any sort, so that really, that was my goal, was all local, small contributions. And so I also felt, it was multiple things going on at the same time. So I was also getting volunteers. That's very important. So I said this throughout, and I truly believe this in everything I do. Your time is your most valuable resource. You can't buy time and you can't get it back. So if anybody gives you time on the phone, gives you any sort of dollar donation because time is money, or they go out and they help me or they spend time talking to me, I was so grateful for that. I hand wrote, if I knocked on your door and you weren't home, I did a lot of things people didn't do. If I knocked on your door and you weren't home, I hand wrote a note that said, I'm sorry I missed you. Here's my website. Here's my cell phone. Please call me. And I remember my husband saying, we can make it computerized. I can make your script look like. And I said, no, they're going on sticky notes. And I would, at night, while watching TV or eating dinner with my kids, I would handwrite each one. Volunteer once said to me, I have beautiful handwriting. I can write those for you. And I said, no, has to come from me. All the donations, I wrote a handwritten thank you note specific to that person. I didn't know them. So,
And sorry to cut you off there. How many donations did you get? How often were you having to do this?
Every night. God, thank God. Knock on wood. Every single night I was doing this. Hundreds, because they were small donations. I got hundreds of them, and it actually, I loved it. I'm old school. I grew up with my mom telling me on my wedding flight. So I got married, and on the flight of my honeymoon the next day, I was writing thank you notes. My husband goes, "What are you doing?" I said, because it's important to me. Each one got written on the flight. He's like, don't you want to spend time with, I'll spend time with you later. I got to get this done. Writing personalized notes is that important to me. So because it's somebody giving up of their time, do you know how precious that is? So it was, so I did a lot of that throughout the day. And then I was going to events. I was either going to endorsement interviews during the day, having fundraisers, going to other candidate fundraisers so I could support them, going to events, speaking in front of people. I loved meet and greets. People would invite me to their home. This is what I did all day and all night long.
That's an incredible work ethic to do for 9 months too. 5 a.m. to around midnight every day. It's just unbelievable.
I loved it. I can't even tell you. I have to tell you, I loved every minute of it. I loved the guy screaming at me that you're all a bunch of liars. I loved every aspect of it because I really got to be with people and connect with people, even when they weren't happy.
So if you got the phone call again a few months from now or a year from now, whatever it may be, a couple of years from now, okay, we want you to run again, would you think about it? Would you say yes right away? What would your reaction to that be?
Yes, I am not done. Okay. This is not the last you heard of me. I like to also think about the universe and maybe I lost. I also have to rationalize this for myself, but maybe I lost because I was helping other people decide to run. And so it was actually really important to me. I was a high school teacher. So I started a high school and college internship program, and I made sure that I grabbed interns. And so one of my interns, I just wrote her a letter for law school to get into law school, and she wants to run. And so I keep on saying, well, maybe I lost because I was meant to inspire her. I know for a fact that there was a person running in this current election who called me up. He was a volunteer of mine, became a really good friend. And he said, you inspired me to run. And he's now running. So I would absolutely run again. Like I said, I loved everything about it. However, I'm relocating. So I have to start over and try to get involved in my community and see what it's like. And, but yes, I do. I want to serve people. And I know this sounds corny, and I know that in today's day and age, it's so divisive And so the rhetoric is so bad, but I think there's no greater way to serve than to be an elected official and to help people.
What makes you say that? I mean, obviously you ran, you obviously feel passionate about this, but anything in particular that makes you think that this is the best way to serve?
I think you can create real change. I think you can absolutely. I think it's frustrating. I think that, there's going to be times where you would probably want to bang your head against the wall. And the one thing I was able to see firsthand is how this system really sucks and really needs some changes. But you got to work with what you have. So I'm old school. I was able to see, look, I've seen some really bad politicians in my day. I don't think it's fair that currently I have an assembly person who doesn't go to work, who doesn't represent me. I've seen some really good elected officials on the other side that I was able to meet through this process, and on the same political party that I'm in, both sides, that truly care and are truly dedicated. And that impresses me. I aspire to be that. Now, I'm not going to go overnight. So what I've decided to do also is to go back to, now I'm in this point. I don't have a job right now. I don't have a direction. I'm at a different phase in my life. I'm sort of starting over. And I'm going to go back to the original idea, climate change is very important. And I was one of the only candidates really running and talking a lot about climate change here, which is insane because I'm on Long Island and I'm right near the beach. And so Superstorm Sandy was not our friend. So we experienced it firsthand. But that's my true love, is going back to, because the fact is we have a lot of issues, but if we don't have a place to live, if we don't have clean air or clean water, if we don't have a planet, nothing else is going to matter. So I think right now I'm going to go back to doing that work, which is very frustrating because I wish people would understand, the clock is ticking, but I'm very optimistic and hopeful that we can still turn it around. And work on that while I get engaged in the local politics of wherever I go. But yeah, I hope to run again. And if it's not meant to be, that's okay, because I'm going to still work at making a difference wherever I live.
That is beautiful. I love that. I love your philosophy about life, and the lessons you've learned, and thank you for sharing them with us. And a few questions I'd like to ask before we wrap up here are always about your own learning experiences and things and people that have inspired you. So, like, for example, any courses, books, teachers, leaders of your past that have inspired you, that have stuck with you throughout your journey.
Oh my gosh, where do you start? I mean, everybody. I think I had an amazing mentor once. I've had all terrible bosses, and those are a gift also, because you get to see how not to be. But I had this one mentor, Bob West, and we met at the elevator. He was like the bigwig, and so he had rounded up everybody that worked for him. And he said, my office is always open. Come talk to me. And nobody would talk to him, because it's corporate America and you're scared of your new boss. Mm-hmm. And so we met at the elevator, and I remember I said to him, hi, my name is Ellen Lederer. I work at this department and I work for you. And I'll never forget this. Again, small moments is what changes your life, not the big ones. And I remember him saying, no, Ellen, you work with me. You don't work for me. And that guided me through everything. So I still think about, it's all about people. And so he used to also say, when people will come in and out of your life for a reason, you might not know it, but there's always, a reason. So when I read a book, and by the way, my goal is to read a book a week. So far, I've been doing good this year. Wow. I'm doing well. I'm going to get there. So the books I read and the things I see and the people I meet, there's always a lesson. So I try to look back and see what the lesson is, I don't so much. My mom and dad were a huge inspiration. So if you want to people, but a thing inspired me. I had a bad thing happen in my life, and I remember afterwards I couldn't get a grip. And I'm optimistic. Like I could see the good in everyone and everything, and I just couldn't get a grip. And I remember my neighbor saying to me, "You got to snap out of this. You know, like it's enough already. Get your act together." So that night I started Grateful Universe. When I went to bed at night, one thing I'm grateful for, one thing I ask for the universe. The grateful thing could be my underwear was clean today. I mean, it could have been, oh, I got a great parking spot. You don't have to go big, okay? But at the end of the day, you can always find one thing that you're grateful for, and that inspires me. Every single day is to find the one thing that I'm grateful for, and intention, the one thing that I ask for the universe. And that sort of just leads me through it. So I read a lot of these books on inspiration and dying with dignity and what matters. And so there's no one person. I don't remember when the light switch went off on changing your mindset from I have to I get to. Mm-hmm. These are all things. All you got to do is slightly change, why me? Why not me? And these things inspire me. But I hope every single day I run into people or things or incidents that inspire me.
I love all of that. And as we wrap up here, we already kind of talked about what's kind of next for you. That's usually one of my last questions, but we already talked about that. So I also just want to let everyone that's listening know about your educational background, because it's very impressive. And I want to give you kudos, because everyone I've ever met that has gone to what I would call like an upper tier school has talked about it, especially on camera. And you went to George Washington undergrad and grad, and then you did another graduate degree at Columbia. And that's actually another gentleman I talked to in the past, who his long-term goal is a young guy too, but his long-term goal is to be a congressman, also from New York. And I had a great conversation. I think he's a good guy, and he's built a big following on social media. But he was always quick to mention, I went to Harvard. I was top class, and it's like, I think it's gonna hurt you from connecting with people. And I could tell how much you want to connect with people, and you're there for the people. So like that's a great advantage for you, whether it takes you into politics or anywhere else in life, as a mentor yourself and just continue to grow and serve others. So I wanted to mention that because I usually don't have to, and it's a really still very impressive accomplishment.
Thank you. There's two sides of that though. I had to decide while running, do I refer to myself as doctor? Because I'm a doctor. And so I have a doctoral degree. And I didn't want, it's interesting because it's very difficult for me, because here I earned it, but I didn't want to be that person who flaunted it. And I didn't know if it would keep me from connecting with people, because they're like, oh, you have a doctoral, it never fails. You have a doctoral degree from Columbia? And so I'm always like, is it the dumb blonde thing? Nobody ever understood that. They're like, really? And I'm like, no, I made it up. Like, who makes that up? But so thank you, because it was a concerted, not in this conversation, but it was one of those things. Do you add in? And I remember going to my first, I didn't tell anybody, and I went to my first fundraiser, and the person introducing me, again, it was nowhere on my website. It was nowhere, except that I have a doctoral degree. And I remember when he said, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Ellen Lederer. I was like, wow, usually I don't get called doctor. So thank you. Yes, I don't, it was a very big deal, and there's a whole backstory to that, but I appreciate you acknowledging it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think people might be surprised by it, because there's usually you can tell. Like, just to be honest, usually you can tell, and it's usually very off-putting. So I feel like people will bring that up too when there's a kind of an own internal, maybe it's imposter syndrome, their own internal insecurities. Because I find myself doing that with the CPA title. That was actually my background. So, a bit about me is I went to the University of Kansas, undergrad and grad, from Kansas as well, and got accounting, both of those, corporate finance, and got my CPA. And I found myself bringing that up in conversations. I'm in my late 20s now, but in my early 20s, I found myself bringing that up in conversation when I would feel like in an insecure spot. My first job, for example, I was at a big accounting firm. I was on the consulting side of things, and these people are from all these fancy schools and all these fancy degrees, and I just find myself like kind of almost throwing it up, like, oh yeah, I got my CPA. It's like in a moment of insecurity. In conversations with many people with much fancier degrees and much more upper tier schools, I've kind of noticed that same thing. I've been able to see my own self in that. I've also been able to see my own self in you in better ways, thank goodness. So I'm very interested in other people. I want to be able to help where I can, and it's actually what brought me here to Maker's Bar to speak with leaders like yourself. Leaders come in every shape and size and fashion and industry, and this is always be able to get to learn and to know more people and find another journey to follow. So saying all that, I'm really excited to follow your journey and see the next time you're on. And you're more than welcome to come back here, and you can kind of go off that or build on that social media platform you had before. And we'll get tens of thousands of views here, and you can take clips and post them yourself and all that good stuff. Very happy to host you, and just excited to follow the journey. Thank you for taking a part here today.
I love it. Thank you. Yeah, my husband and I are actually going to chronicle our just jumping off. We started 50 and over it together. So we're going to YouTube and show people that not to be so afraid of change, and hope to convince other people. Don't on your deathbed ever say, I wish I had taken that chance and moved someplace, or I wish that it's scary, but it's okay. And so thank you. I'm going to take you definitely up on that.
Awesome. I look forward to it. That's a very cool name too, by the way, 50 and over it. That's a great, So I can tell you campaign. So
I told you my husband is the amazing communications person and marketer. So 50 and over it together, because we're going to do it together. So he's the one who comes up with all the catchy names.
Oh, I love it. Anywhere else that anyone listening can find you online?
Yeah. So I have 50 and over it together is going to be on YouTube. I was also writing for Living Clean and Dirty, which was my blog that I was writing about ways that you can kind of clean up your own, making better choices and helping the environment. Warning, the entire reason why it's Living Clean and Dirty is it has some language that's very colorful, because I think that if you can make somebody laugh and tell a story that makes them think more than sitting up on your soapbox and just telling people you shouldn't be buying water bottles that are not reusable. So you can find me there, and we're just going to be 50 and over it together all over the place. Instagram and TikTok and Facebook.
Sounds good. I'll keep an eye out for it all. And once again, thank you for your time. Thank you for taking an hour here today to speak with me and share your journey with me and the followers. And until next time, thank you again. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes, have a good one.
You too.